and welcome to the virtual edition of our year-round member screening series, Film Independent Presents, and this Q&A for Netflix's six-category Emmy-nominated hit doc-series, Tiger King, Murder, Mayhem, and Madness. My name is Jen Wilson, and I'm a senior programmer here at Film Independent. Thanks to Film Independent Presents' lead sponsor, the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, and thank you to our new virtual screenings partner, Vision Media. Make sure to check out our Film Independent calendar at filmindependent.org to see what virtual screenings we have coming up. Now, please welcome our very special guest for today, actor and filmmaker Fisher Stevens, who's an executive producer on Tiger King, and documentary filmmaker Rebecca Chaiklin, who's executive producer as well as director on Tiger King. Welcome and congrats on your Emmy nominations.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yes.
Fisher, you started your Hollywood career as an actor. Can you talk a little bit about when and how you started producing documentaries?
Yeah, I'd say when I turned in my mid-20s, I wanted to do more than act, and I did a lot of theater in New York, as well as some film work. I co-founded a theater company called Naked Angels, and we were mostly actors, but it was actors that wanted to direct and do other things. Actually, Kenny Lonergan, who won the Oscar, started there, and Matthew Broderick was already famous. He was there, and Sarah Jessica Parker, John Robin Bates, lots of screenwriters, Mark Ruffalo. And I got to produce plays, and then I thought, okay, I'd like to produce movies because I wanted to kind of keep going in that behind the scenes. So I started producing movies, and I produced a film called Once in a Lifetime, which was the story of the New York Cosmos. Basically a love letter to New York in the 70s. And my partner at the time said, we'll do it, but if it's not good, you've got to make sure it comes out good. And they handed us an unwatchable documentary, and I took it over and I started kind of co-directing it with somebody, fell in love with the form, had the greatest time I've had in years working on anything, and thought, okay, this is something I really want to do. And a guy came to me after that with a movie called Crazy Love, which is a really cool film that I got to co-direct. And I just fell in love with the form and been doing it since. So here we are, still doing it.
Is Crazy Love the documentary about the couple, the guy throws the acid in the woman's face and then she gets back together with him?
Yeah. In 1959, Burt and Linda Pugash met, and Burt was married. Linda was his secretary. She was 18. And Burt ended up kind of falling in love with her. And she said, leave your husband. He said, I leave your wife. And Burt was like, I'm going to leave her. But he never left her. So she left him. So he hired thugs, and they threw acid in her eyes and blinded her and made her bald. And they got married.
Yeah. I love that doc. I hadn't realized that you'd work on that doc.
Yeah.
So Rebecca and Fisher, your collaboration started a few years ago. You made another documentary together too. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? How you two met?
Sure. I mean, we had met before that. We have a lot of crossover friends in our lives, but we both do a lot of activism, and we were both in New York, and this really wild movement, which became Occupy Wall Street, germinated sort of in our backyard. And it was literally a situation where I was like, we should really go down there. And we went, and we were like, we should really start filming this. This is kind of remarkable. Yeah. You know, all these passionate, very savvy in terms of how to use social media activists had all met each other online. Almost nobody knew each other or had any history before, and they had all congregated in this park. And it was this incredible living experiment in activism and democracy, and there were great triumphs and failures. And so we had not one penny at the time, and we just sort of asked people that we'd worked on various projects with, would you come after your other shoot? Would you come on these days? Oh, yeah. And that was
and we got into Berlin, the film festival. I mean, I wouldn't say we had a massive success with it, but it was a cool movie. It was called Another World. And Rebecca and I we started sharing an office then, and we kind of been sharing offices. And then this at a little later, Eric Good had called me to look at some footage that he was filming in the markets, the illegal wildlife markets in China, kind of where they think COVID may have started with the bats.
Right.
And he asked if I'd be interested in making a film with him on it, and I said, well, I would be interested, but I know someone who really would be great to work with for you, and that was Rebecca, and they had known each other before also. So it kind of, I'd say the germ of Tiger King started years ago then. We didn't know it was Tiger King, and at the time hadn't met Joe Exotic, but we did start kind of talking about working on a project, and actually started putting together pieces for some kind of, actually it was an activist film about animal rights. And here we go, Tiger.
Yeah.
Okay.
So right, so you both like to make documentaries about political issues and environmental issues. So you both have a history of that, and so does Eric as well, right? All of his films are on environmental issues as well, right? Eric Good?
Well, this is his first film.
Oh, okay.
He made little shorts, but he runs an NGO called the Turtle Conservancy, which I work with, which is it's a land conservation program that he started that saves endangered species of turtles and tortoises, and has been in that world for a long time.
Yeah, he's been in that world and he's also a very successful entrepreneur. He started in the nightclub world and then went into restaurants and became a successful hotelier in New York.
Yeah.
I actually met him. I was a door girl for him at one of his nightclubs. And I worked for him, fought every night, but we became really good friends. So
yeah, I also met him at a nightclub, but I was a customer. Very
wow.
In teenager probably.
I bet it was hard to have imagined back then that you would all be making this series together in 2020. That became Tiger King.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in the first episode, it's he sees the snow leopard in the back of the minivan and decides he wants to move towards the exotic animals focus.
We had just gone on like almost a reconnaissance trip. Eric had sort of pitched me. He was like, you're not going to believe it, because he's a reptile person. He's into turtles and tortoises and other reptiles. And there are all these subsections of this exotic animal world. So he was like, I'm going to take you to Florida, and it's like Breaking Bad, but instead of dealing meth, they're dealing exotic reptiles.
Right.
But probably, I don't want to spend any money because we're not going to get access, because it's this very secretive, hidden world, and nobody wants a camera, and everyone wants to stay under the radar because everything they're doing is in the shadows and somewhat nefarious. So we went, and it wasn't quite as difficult because they're also all narcissists and they all wanted to be on camera. But it was, if it hadn't been for his long-standing relationship with this notorious reptile dealer, we wouldn't have gotten in. And we were there and we're just sort of checking things out and filming a little bit. And then that guy showed up, and he just had his finger bitten off by a venomous snake. And he was like, there to purchase another venomous snake, and was like, check out what's in the back of our van. And I almost died. I was like, we have to call the police. This is crazy. That's a snow leopard, because there are only a couple thousand left on and Eric was like, shh.
This is it. This is a good story.
Let's just ask him where it came from. And that began this journey into this crazy world of people who keep big cats.
So was Joe one of the first people in this world that you met, or did you actually come into contact with other people before him?
Mario was actually the first person we met, because he was right there. We were in South Florida, and
the toughest
to talk to. Like, we met him, but we weren't able to film with him. It took a long time to like get in with him, and then we weren't able to film with him, and then eventually we convinced him that excuse me. But we didn't meet Joe until a few months later. Joe, on the other hand, was the easiest. He was just had this insatiable appetite to be on camera and to become famous, and was very easy to access and wore everything on his sleeve. It's just, there was nothing that was off limits with him.
Yeah.
So when you first got into this, I think you said in another interview, you thought the focus was mostly going to be on Joe and his rivalry with Carol Baskin. How did all the other exotic animal people come into play? Were they just introduced to you from their associations with Joe, or?
I mean, we actually started in a place where we thought we were going to look at the efficacy of keeping tigers and other big cats in captivity. It was sort of more like it was going to be like a Blackfish of this world. And then we met these characters, and we initially thought that Carol Baskin was sort of like the one person, and she still is somebody who is doing the right thing. And eventually every single person that we talked to was like, but her husband, you got to look into her husband. And we were like, no, we're not interested in that. We're like trying to focus on, and there was a rivalry between them. So we knew that in order to get a bigger audience, it would be great to incorporate, it gave us like a narrative thread to follow. This rivalry between this woman who had been the largest private owner of big cats in America and had a change of heart. She had evolved and was now actually crusading very effectively to shut down a lot of these roadside zoos where there's a lot of really abusive, horrific practices going on for the animals and for the people who work there oftentimes. And so that's where it started. And
yeah, the husband thing didn't come up till kind of
later.
And actually that was quite good, I think, because we kind of discovered it, and the audience kind of discovers it the same way we do, Rebecca and Eric, really. But so I think that really helped. And by that point, Carol had opened up quite a bit, so it was easier to get into that story.
She was also amazing. I have to say, she was like, she let us spend, I can't even tell you how much time, her and her husband, in terms of, I mean, they're very upset because we ended up going, I mean, it was one of those things where initially we were like, we'll talk to a couple people and just, we have to, do our due diligence at this juncture. We'd be remiss as storytellers not to look into this. And then it was just every time we opened one door, it was like, what? Yeah. Like, you've got to be, and, our heads were spinning. Like we just couldn't believe. And to this day, I really have no idea what happened. Like none of us do, but there's certainly like extremely suspect circumstances around this man's disappearance.
So yeah, I mean, this is one of those stories, just like watching this series, it feels like it's like an iceberg, where the part that's sticking out of the water is like tiny and the part that you can't see that's below the water is huge. In every episode, you're getting a little bit more and more and more of the iceberg. Did you have any inkling that so many other stories were going to be developed as part of your initial story?
No, I mean, we never in a million years thought we were going to be making a true crime series. I mean, it was the first thing from any of our interests. We thought it was going to be much more sort of a colorful, entertaining, but a
portrait inside the minds of people that keep big cats. But it just kept evolving. And then when, Tim Stark and when those guys started showing up, the plot just kept getting thicker and thicker with Jeff Lowe, and it just kept getting crazier and crazier. I mean, these guys were there. I was looking at it coming. They'd show me stuff, and I'd be just like, I mean.
Yeah, it was, if we had recorded our edit meetings as we're editing and the story was unfolding contemporaneously, the information that was coming in was just, we would all say like, I can't, this is like, it's stranger than fiction, right?
And it kept coming up until like, we had to just finally stop telling the story because it kept unraveling.
Yeah. We were literally filming the day that we locked our 7th episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask, were you on location with them when all of these things happened, like the fire that destroyed his studio and the accidental suicide of the husband? And were you guys all there for all that?
we were not there for, I mean, this project was a filmmaker's dream in that each and every one of our characters was obsessed with filming themselves.
Okay.
Joe allegedly, I mean, most of it burned down in that alligator house that burned, but had filmed 30,000 hours of his life before he was 30. He had cameras running around the clock, and we developed a very close rapport. I can see I'm coming out of the light, so I'm coming closer to you.
You have the better light. You want this side?
No, it's fine.
I'll be a gentleman. Go ahead. Yeah. You have the better light. Go ahead.
I didn't want to take
I know, but
better light.
You do.
Anyway, so it was a dream, and there were things, anything that we missed, and those were two things that we missed. We were there right after Travis had killed himself, but we weren't there the day that it had happened. He filmed it, all of it, every last bit of it. So it was, a dream in that way.
Imagine if we had that other footage to work with, the movie would have taken another 10 years to finish.
Yeah. He gave us, like almost 2,000 hours of footage.
Yeah. So he had a lot more.
So at the point where you guys got involved, was Rick Kirkham there filming his reality series at the point when you guys started making your movie?
He was when we first started in the beginning, but then soon after he was out.
Did you guys have any inkling of the blowout that was happening between Joe and Rick before the fire happened?
No, we didn't.
I mean, Rick is an amazing character, and I love that interview with him.
Yeah.
He's fascinating. We literally could have done a whole nother episode on Rick Kirkham.
I've seen another documentary just on him. He made that doc from a few years ago, TV Junkie.
It's amazing.
Yeah. But you could make a documentary about any one of these people, I feel like. They're all such huge characters and so fascinating, and their stories are also interesting. I mean, you did make the point of quite a few of them, the exotic animal people, are narcissists and love to be on camera. But I feel like this is one of those films where you happened on an industry of which there are many in the United States, which has been heretofore almost completely unregulated. And that's why so many of these outlandish people and things, can happen. I noticed,
I think a lot of people think that we somehow manipulated circumstances or mischaracterized people. And honestly, this was where I couldn't believe it. Eric was much more familiar with it. So he was like, you're never going to believe this. And he has a very funny sense of humor and was like, you're just going to die. Like, you're not going to believe that what I'm going to show you. And sure enough, it was. I mean, it was so hard to believe it was real every step of the way. And we would, sit down with somebody and they'd be like, no, we don't want to film here. We would think we should film here. Or, you would walk into somebody's house and you were like, it was like the most unbelievable set. Like, the best production designers couldn't come up with the way these people had decorated their houses.
Yeah, I think the one thing I'll say, just from observing Eric and Rebecca and watching the dailies and the footage constantly, is that they didn't judge anybody and they accepted this world. And obviously Eric has been around this world for many years, but the beauty of Tiger King, in my opinion, is that these guys just let them be who they are. And there was no like, oh, we're going to make you this or make you that. They are who they are. They're presented real and honestly 100%. And that's why I think the film works. And I think that Rebecca and Eric really found amazing, lovable qualities about every one of these characters.
Yes.
With everything that we're going through. So you feel for them in a way. At times.
One of my favorite characters ended up being Joshua Dial. I wondered if you talk a little bit about him. He ends up having some of the most profound observations, I think, about this world. After Travis dies, he says something like, "I just kind of felt like I was attached by pain to Joe. Like we had a bond of pain." And I just like stopped it, and I was just like, "That's so profound." How he couldn't leave this place because he felt so bad for Joe and what had happened to Travis. But what's it like when you're watching this footage? Are you looking for people like Joshua Dial who can sort of contribute in telling some of this story?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things at times we struggled with, and then we just decided to embrace it, for better or worse, was that a lot of this is not a world that, I mean, the lead characters were very much into being filmed, but it was not a world where people were particularly well versed in how to express themselves articulately. And it was hard at times, in terms of, and Josh, when you meet somebody like Josh, who's extremely articulate and also extremely damaged and has really gone through a lot as a gay man growing up, or young man growing up in the Bible Belt, where it's just, we forget, on our coastal lives, where who would even think about that anymore, being an issue. But if you're in rural Oklahoma, it's a huge burden, and it's a very, very difficult life to live. And so between that, and he suffers from depression, and he's poor, and he doesn't have access to the proper, he needs psychiatric help. He has PTSD from having witnessed Travis, who is his good friend, and he probably had a crush on, kill himself. So, but he is incredibly articulate. And so,
yeah,
of course we would gravitate to him.
I mean, also the fact that Joe was so comfortable with his sexuality, living there and doing that. I mean, that's another thing that certainly blew my mind, and just how Joe was Joe. He was very comfortable with it in rural Oklahoma, and everybody around him was comfortable with it. And that was a beautiful thing.
He, I think, had learned that the only way to deal with it, reckon with it in that culture, was to put it out there. Like he had to sell it to the world. But I mean, you talk to people in that area, when we would talk to people in town, they were incredibly disparaging of him in his homosexuality. And he faced incredible discrimination, which is why I think in some ways he created his own world. Because the world outside where he grew up didn't accept him. So he created his own kingdom.
Yeah, I noticed a couple of characters in this say something about not having had very many friends. Carol says that too. She didn't have many friends. And it's interesting the effect of that loneliness as a child, how that manifests in adulthood into sort of wanting the spotlight on you or some kind of validation like that. The amazing thing about this series is that it's always still in the news every week. There's still some new news item every week. The latest was, a few weeks ago, I thought that I heard that Carol was going to get to take over the GW.
She has been awarded it, and Jeff has been given 120 days to vacate.
Okay.
It was once Joe's zoo, and Carol now owns it, but he has a certain amount of time to vacate it.
Okay. Because there was a news item the other day stating that they had lost their license because of some animal abuse issues, and then he posted something on Facebook about he was just closing everything, but it seemed like he was still going to be there. So I wasn't for sure if Carol was going to get to take it over or not.
The USDA, which is the agency which regulates whether or not he could still have animals, but he's not allowed to exhibit them for the public, which is the only way he could possibly afford to have the animals. And so they have revoked that license, which means effectively that he has been shut down. Well, they've suspended it for 21 days, but they are in the process of revoking it forever. And so he will no longer be able to exhibit animals. Carol still will legally own the zoo. She has, for whatever reason, stated that she will not be taking any of the animals herself to her sanctuary, but she will, which is a little perplexing, but she is placing them in other sanctuaries. And PETA has been very active in terms of trying to find new homes. Now, whether or not he sells all the animals, which would be tricky for him because he's being monitored so carefully now, but basically our series, and I think we got a lot of blowback for not having come out stronger on the animal issues, but I think what you will see is that the effect of the Tiger King series, the fact that it did reach audiences the way, you're going to see it in the next year or two, and I think most of these big cat roadside zoos will be a thing of the past.
Yeah,
they're all closing down.
Yeah, the governments are getting hip to it, and I think it's going to have. I think it's had great impact. I mean, that was obviously the original idea of the story that we were going to tell, but it's amazing. Thank God it was popular because it may have the effect that we wanted anyway. And we, got to an entertaining story. So
I think it will. We've been contacted by numerous members of Congress who've been trying to pass legislation to this effect. And they were like, your series blew this world open for the federal agencies, and they're now very actively pursuing some of the allegations that you made that were suggested in
right.
this.
I was going to ask you why you thought that nobody seemed to really care about this before your series. Is it because the animal protection falls under sort of environmental concerns, and that the government is just sort of not prioritizing that?
Well, the current administration doesn't fund any of these agencies that are doing any regulation.
Right. They kind of, Trump administration stopped funding any of this work.
But I do think on another front, and this is very philosophical, but I think it is in some ways, some of the great apes are like 1 to 3% away from us in terms of their DNA, like a chimpanzee or a bonobo or orangutan. And there is a last frontier in terms of these creatures not only having the right to have their habitat, their natural habitats protected, but that we're not allowed as yet another animal on this planet to just exploit them for our own good, every single creature on this planet. And we have to really rethink the way we live with the rest of the planet. And that there should be rights, just as there are human rights, there should be rights for other species.
Also, I mean, people love going to those zoos. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Why they make so much money. People love to go. And at the expense of these animals, they still continue to go, knowing that, and I know there's a good front put up that, these animals are treated really well, but obviously you see how they're treated. I don't well, think about that. Maybe they do now, hopefully.
Yeah. It's tricky because kids love animals, and I've met a number of conservationists who may not have become conservationists had they not gone to a zoo and fallen in love with a lion and I understand that not every child, the vast majority, do not have the privilege to travel on a photo safari. But hopefully with new technology, there will be new ways for us to experience animals that don't lead to the suffering of them.
Right.
I just got to go feed my tiger.
Okay.
Right. Down. Get down. Sorry. But can wait. Okay.
I'm from Illinois, and evidently there's a big one of these zoos in Illinois. I actually think it's mentioned in the movie somewhere. You show a map of a bunch of where these zoos are, and I didn't know it before this film, but my sister said, one of our distant cousins was actually killed by a big cat. And it was somewhere in Illinois, and it made me think about the statement that someone makes in the movie, which is that every place like this has a story, has like tragic stories of things happening to people because, you know, because they're not in control of these animals. And so yeah, just some wild stories. Is Jeff supposed to still be developing his zoo in Thackerville, or did that project completely fall apart?
I mean, he's done a little bit of work, but he hasn't really been developing it. And I think he's come into some more money recently, I think. But now with losing his license, I mean, his big idea is to open a strip club where you can also pet baby tigers while you watch strip.
Oh, okay.
Which, you know, unfortunately probably would do quite well. But
yeah.
But I think that has probably been put on hold. I think he's facing a lot of legal issues in 3 different states around the country right now.
Speaking of that, in episode 7, when everything sort of comes down around Joe, there's many different perspectives from many different people about if Joe actually did pay this guy to travel down to Florida and kill Carol, or if he was framed by 2 guys to make it look like that's what he was doing. Do either of you have any opinion on what the real truth is, or do you sort of feel like we'll never know what the real truth of that situation is?
I mean, obviously I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I should, you know, so Joe is a complicated human being, but I'm actually quite fond of him and all of his complications, and I know that he's done a lot of things that have been hurtful to people, and a lot of things that have been very hurtful to animals. And I, without a doubt, think that I know he was selling tigers, which was illegal across state lines, and he was forging documents in order to do that. And he also shot and killed these 5 tigers, whether they were old and he was just putting them down. And that actually, a lot of animal people will tell you that it's actually less, it's more humane to just shoot them than to actually inject them and let them die slowly over a course of 40 minutes. So he deserves to be punished for the animal abuse that he engaged in. But in terms of the murder for hire, we don't know for sure, but I am highly suspect. There is just, I don't even think that the hitman ever went to Florida. And, you know, there's new information that just was brought to my attention by one of the key players involved in bringing Joe down, that things were really misframed. And I think that this is a case where somebody was a flamboyantly gay man in rural Oklahoma, and he had a jury that had already decided before they even got to the murder for hire. All the charges were put into one trial against him. He had public defenders who were completely overwhelmed, who didn't have the resources to investigate properly, and that he didn't really have a fair shot in terms of his representation in this trial, and that there's so much that if it had come out, he certainly would not be serving alone. Let's put it that way.
And Alan is so untrustworthy. I mean, he's a great character for us, for the movie, but the guy is, I mean, you can't believe a word he says. And Jeff definitely had a lot to say with, we believe, with what he says, you know, had a lot to do with what Alan says. So, really crazy character though. I mean, for filmmakers, Alan was kind of, I mean, crazy. Even the footage you didn't see, there's just so much great footage of Alan.
It's interesting in the end of episode 7, there's a clip of I don't know how you say his last name. Is it Rink or Rinky? Rink. John Rink says, "I ran Joe's Zoo for 12 years, and the feds never talked to me about that."
Exactly.
Indicating that the feds were maybe not interested in what really happened, according to anybody else at the zoo.
I think it's one of those unfortunate situations where they manipulated and got a lot of other people off the hook in order to trump up charges, because nobody had ever gone to prison under the charges, the animal charges that Joe was sentenced for. And it would have probably just been a fine, but they really wanted to take him down. And so having the murder for hire as like an accompanying charge really helped them. And he's now serving a life sentence because he's not a healthy man. And
so John or another one of the characters says at the end of the movie that this seems far from over in terms of the federal investigation of these people. Do you think that any of this is going to finally come down on Jeff Lowe, or that he's managed to escape it all?
I mean, we'll see. It's unfolding literally as we speak right now. But I think it's I don't think it's over. There's a lot that's happening. I think that the landscape will change a lot in the next year in terms of these types of places.
So are you still involved in continuing this story filmically by making a sequel or making a follow-up, or?
I mean,
no?
We're in an exploratory process, but nothing concrete at the moment. You know, obviously we've become, on the one hand, we're totally exhausted with the story. And it was like a small, and it was really wonderful the way it was received, because we thought it was this little quirky story that like 5 people would watch. And on the other hand, we're really invested in the story, and it's still unfolding, and we're like, oh, so we're up, you know, on the fence right now, just trying to figure out, is there really more story to tell, or is it time to move on?
In terms of themes for this show, if you agree that in the end the show has a sort of a theme or something that it all comes to, what is it that you hope that you ultimately hoped your audience's takeaway from the series would be?
Well, I think one thing we did want to shed light into how these animals were treated on these zoos, and how people are addicted to these animals, because they are. There's an addiction, like the zookeepers have an addiction. Like the one guy who goes to Doc Ansel's zoo, like he spends his money there, he brings his family there. I mean, but at the expense of these animals. So I think one takeaway for me was that. Another big takeaway is just this world, and we knew that it was incredibly entertaining, and these people were incredibly entertaining, and to make a piece of to make something that hopefully can change policy, even though we weren't sure where that was going to end up at the end, but really entertain people and make a show about characters that don't usually get a voice, and characters that you don't normally get to see on television. So that was those are some of the themes.
Yeah. And I think, you know, one thing that I thought a lot about when we were making this was that the parallel between the people's argument that it's their right to own guns, and that nobody should, and it's, you know, this is America and we're free here and we can own whatever we want to own, whether it be guns or exotic animals. And that we need to really start rethinking about how that impacts other people, whether it's your distant cousin who was eaten by a big cat, or the cat itself that's living an absolutely miserable life. It's a wild animal. It belongs in the wild. And also, I think there's a real danger in kids only seeing animals in captivity. It's wonderful on one hand, but it also doesn't allow them to ever understand that where these animals really should be. It's like, imagine if you only saw a human being incarcerated. You know, you very different perspective on what a human being is. And so we really have to think about that, and really hopefully start reallocating funds to, 1, protecting the environment, and 2, protecting natural habitat for all these animals.
Which is really what Eric does. His other job is to protect natural habitat for his animals of choice, or tortoises and turtles. And he's just been raising money to buy giant tracts of land that no one can build on, no rainforest, no oil drilling, no lumber, chopping trees down. So yeah, I mean, it's, more tigers in captivity in the United States than in the wild, anywhere in the world. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a figure we wanted to pound into people's heads, which is why it's said a few times in the film.
And they don't even know how many there are because there are no regulations in half these states.
Yeah.
They don't know.
Nobody's counting. Nobody's
there
counting.
could be 7,000 in Texas alone. Nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
So some questions from the audience. Is Joe really singing in his music videos?
He is lip syncing. He is singing, but there's also another voice. And where the truth lies, because I was not in the studio, in terms of how much of it is him and how much of it is another voice, I think we would need a musicologist to really go through it.
I sang in a couple of those tunes.
Oh, okay.
I helped him out.
You and your tiger.
I have a new album coming out next week.
He does?
Recorded in the pen.
Oh my God.
He's a huge music manager now, like one of the biggest in the country.
Yeah.
Speaking of Joe Exotic, has he or anyone else from the show contacted you since the show aired?
Oh yeah. I mean, Joe has been on lockdown under COVID in the facility that he's currently in.
Sorry.
Hi, Lolo.
That's okay.
But he calls me quite frequently, and we text and email back and forth, multiple times a day.
I'm surprised he hasn't called while we've been on this Zoom.
This is an interesting question. How do you care for your own mental health while being around such a large amount of narcissists, as well as filming atrocities against animals?
I mean, it was challenging at times, but I think, you just want to stay committed to telling a truthful story and trying to be supportive where you can of the people that you're filming with and I'm really grateful that this was a project where people just opened their lives to us, and they were not always the prettiest lives, and they just let us in, and they didn't hold, for the most part, anything back, which was really amazing as a filmmaker. And I think we're all really grateful to the characters for being so open, and hopefully we provided some, I think sometimes talking about some of the things that had happened in their lives, because they are not in a sector of our community, our culture, that has access to mental health care, was actually it was helpful to talk about things. And we hopefully did it in a way that was respectful enough and supportive enough that it helped people maybe begin to work through some things.
But you would come back from trips being just like, believe what I've seen.
It's true. Trying to be very political about this.
But yeah, but you get, yeah.
It was mentioned that Joe is actually afraid of tigers. Did you see anything that proved this to be true?
I didn't, but he had like very specific cats that he did his shows with, but and then he had tons of babies, like it was like a puppy mill of baby tigers at his place, like pack and play after pack and play after pack and play, just filled with them in his house. But we were not really trying to encourage him to go in with all his animals because it seemed very dangerous. Yeah,
he got bit early on in the filming. Like one of the first days shooting, he's petting it. It's in the movie, but it was
he got chomped on the hand, right?
Yeah, and then it was like, wow. I mean, how often does this happen? We started wondering, like.
But I think Joe and most of the characters in the film grew up in a very different time and place where, he was a kid on a ranch, and it's just a very different way of thinking about animals. Animals are there to help you work. They're there to serve you. And Doc Antle came out of the same background. And so, there's a lot of sort of intellectual judgment, I think, on our part. And we really tried to understand where people were coming from. And I think Joe was very good at what he did, but that also, all these people who work with these big animal, like big cats and with the public, there is a certain level of brutality that goes with being able to bring them out into public. And that's probably understating it.
Right.
Well, thank you so much for talking with us today about Tiger King. It's definitely one of my favorite doc series of the year. And good luck with the Emmys.
Thank you.
And take care. Good luck. Thank you so much.
You guys too.
Thank you.
And thanks for
You
having
too.
us on. And remember, don't get a tiger
Okay.
or a lion.
I'll try not. I'll try not to.
Words of wisdom.
Thank you, Rebecca and Fisher. Bye.